This is Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, a podcast and radio program presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan.
Driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
And now, here he is, your host, Jim Ervin.
Well, thank you so much, Parker, and welcome to Time Signatures. I'm your host, Jim Ervin, and I'm honored to welcome today's guest. She began her career in music after being discovered by Dave Stewart of the Eurythmics at the age of 16. She is best known for her expressive vocals and impressive guitar skills, and she has also earned high praise from the likes of Stevie Wonder and Annie Lennox. Her most recent album, Heavy Soul, debuted at number 2 on the Billboard Blues Album chart. This album, produced by Kevin Shirley, who also worked with the Black Crowes, Aerosmith, and Joe Bonamassa, continues her path of pushing genre boundaries, but it's also showing her continued growth as a fearless songwriter and musician. She is currently in the midst of her fall U.S. tour, and I believe we're catching up with her in the state of Indiana this afternoon, if my information is correct. Joanne Shaw Taylor, welcome to Time Signatures. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. That was a lovely introduction.
Well, thank you so much. Listen,
you sound very, very good.
I guess the best place for us to start would be at the beginning, Joanne. Talk about your earliest memories of music. Do you have any favorite bands that, or maybe a song that you just had to hear over and over again?
Oh, well, I mean, I grew up in a very, very musical household. My dad was a massive music fan, as was my mother, actually. But my dad was the musician. He played guitar and harmonica and got me and my older brother, Ben, into it. Mm-hmm. I think one song I remember, well, one band particularly, because I'm from an area in the UK called the Black Country, and we used to drive over there every weekend to see my grandparents. And I always felt like I was going home when either we listened to Led Zeppelin or Slade, which are both from that area. Okay. So I think that was sort of the earliest music I was exposed to, I think.
Very cool. Now, what were you doing musically before you were actually discovered?
It's a bit of a mix. I'm embarrassed to say, till about the age of 12, I was very much a boy band fan.
Okay.
Probably not unusual for women of my age. But yeah, I started playing classical guitar at school when I was 8, and then it was really when I was 13 I discovered Stevie Ray Vaughan, and that sort of launched me into just being a massive blues fan, really, and learning as much as I could about the genre, and you know, that spawned into rock and roll and soul and all kinds of music. So that was the kind of catalyst for me.
Okay. Now, after being discovered at the age of 16, had you already decided that a career in music was going to be on your path, or did that come later on?
No, I was pretty much, I think as soon as I saw Stevie, I was pretty blown away and inspired. And about a year after that, I managed to get a band together and started gigging around the UK. And I'd already gone over to Europe a little bit. And back then, you left school in the UK at 16. So I was, after being encouraged by my head of year, decided to take a gap year and have a year out to focus on it. And it was within that year that Dave kind of came on the scene. So sort of confirmed that I was correct to take the year off.
Okay. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the program, your music and showmanship has earned high praise from Stevie Wonder and Annie Lennox, among others. How does that feel to garner so much support from fellow musicians like that?
It's, I mean, it's hard to put into words, to be honest. I mean, it's you know, on one hand, you think of the 13-year-old kid I was in my bedroom, you know, learning to play guitar. Mm-hmm. You know, I think she'd be blown away by what's been happening. It's also just very humbling, I think. It's, again, it's hard to put into words. It's obviously, I don't think about it very often, else it'd probably blow my mind, to be honest.
Well, Joanne, I want to shift gears just a little bit, and I want to ask you about the COVID shutdown. I mean, obviously, it affected all of us in one way or another, but how did you process that time, and what did you use to keep the spark alive in your musical pursuits?
To me, I mean, I hate to say this because COVID was such an awful time for so many people, yes. And obviously millions and millions of people lost their lives. Yeah. So I'm hesitant to say it was actually very beneficial for me. just because I was completely burned out, if I'm honest, and I was really starting to struggle with anxiety and depression. Unfortunately, at the time, my label I was on, Sony, were amazing and really focused in on mental health of touring musicians. So they'd actually approached me and said, look, if you can get to the end of the year, we'll give you a good 6 months off where you don't have to be anything but Joanne and go home and spend time with friends and family. And then 2 weeks later, COVID shut everything down. So again, I don't want to say it was a fantastic time for me, because, you know, it's not what I mean, but I just tried to make the best of a bad situation. And I took about 6 months off. I didn't even touch a guitar. And, you know, just got into a routine. I've been touring since I was 16 years old. And in the midst of that, my mom had been sick since I was 15 with cancer on and off. And she unfortunately eventually passed away when I was 28. And I didn't have much time to grieve. I sort of went back out on the road a few days after the funeral. So it all kind of built up. So it was really good for me to stop and then just stay home and watch all the videos that inspired me when I was a kid and you know, reconnect with why I love this and why I do it. Unfortunately, I'm in a much better place now and so thankful to be back out on the road.
Yes, absolutely. And it's nice to see so not just you, but so many musicians, you know, who were sitting on the wayside and weren't able to get out there and do stuff, including Joe and Larry McRae and several others in the genre. It's so nice to see them back out again, I got to tell you. But
yeah,
you've released several albums via Rough Records and Axe House before coming into contact with Joe Bonamassa and Josh Smith. In 2021, you released your 7th album, aptly named The Blues Album, an album that continues to be one of my favorites, by the way.
oh, thanks.
But this release came through the KTBA label, Keeping the Blues Alive, and debuted at #1 on the Billboard Blues chart. Talk about that process for a moment. What was it like working with Joe and Josh?
It was wonderful. And I mean, that was, again, something that probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for COVID. I've been best friends with Joe since 2008. Been very heavily involved in each other's lives. And we've kind of worked together on and off. I've opened up for him and stuff. But it was really because of COVID, you know, we were both off the road. So we were, like many people, FaceTiming a great deal. And, you know, he knew about what I'd been going through. And I said, you know, I think to get back into it, I think I've always wanted to do a blues covers album. You know, I can consider myself a blues guitarist, but I don't necessarily consider myself a blues artist. I don't write blues songs, mostly because I can't. I find it very difficult. So I was kind of talking to him, and he started sending me song ideas, and eventually I said, look, you're off the road, I'm off the road. Why don't I come down to Nashville? We can hang out. You're already kind of producing it. So it's just meant to be a fun project between friends, to be honest. And then it spiraled into Roy, his business partner, offered to put it out. And, you know, I'm still on the label now and being managed by Roy. Joe's obviously still heavily involved. So it was wonderful. It was exactly what I wanted it to be. It was making a really fun album with, you know, someone I love and get on great with. So, and then adding in Josh as well, who I've known, not as well as Joe, but, you know, I've been friends with over the years. So it was just really nice way to get back into the industry after a little break.
Yeah, and I had an interview with Joe earlier this year, and he referred to you as his British sister, and had lots of glowing reports of your music and loves your work. So I think it's a great project with you guys.
Yeah, we've got each other's backs. We're good mates. He's been very good to me, and hopefully he feels the same about me.
Very cool. Now, from that album, you've come to another period where you're working with another one of Joe's projects, Journeyman Records. How did that relationship come about, and how has this collaboration with Journeyman impacted your music career?
Oh, it's a tough one. I mean, it came about because, as I said, doing the blues album during COVID. Again, it was just meant to be a fun project between me and Joe. And I was on Sony at the time. And everything just sort of it was because of COVID, everything sort of got changed about. So I was looking for a new contract, you know, and Sony was fantastic. But obviously when Roy and Joe offered me a deal, it's, you know, I get to work with the two men I love and trust most in the industry.
Sure.
You know, it's hard not to take that up. Again, particularly as I was looking to make things easier on myself, you know, mental health wise. So I think there's a support system there now that I really benefit from, knowing I'm working very hard, but I'm doing it with the support of people who genuinely care about my music, but genuinely care about me.
Yes.
Very much so. And then just, again, Joe's always been a bit of a mentor to me, and a big brother in that, he's reached success, obviously,
Yes.
more than I have, but everything I've done, he's already done. So, the times was driving myself from Maine to Detroit in a minivan at 2 o'clock in the morning, he's already done all that. And I could, because, it's hard for me to phone a school friend that I've had since I was 14 and explain to them what I'm doing. Whereas, Joe's already done all of that.
Right.
It kind of gets it. So it's just, I'm just in a really happy place and I'm loving it. And they've been great. And they've kind of changed the music industry model of doing everything themselves. So we've got a lot more control over what I do and what I don't do artistically and, work wise, what kind of gigs suit me and what don't. So it's just been fantastic all round.
Joanne, I got to tell you, when he was in Detroit last November, I had a chance to go see him at the Fox Theater in Detroit, and he talked about making the rounds and going to all of the labels, and they just kept turning him down and turning him away, and finally he stood there, put his hands on his hip, and he goes, "How do you like me now?" And you talk about the recreation of the model, okay, for being a musician and for doing the things that you're doing out there. And it seems like he's really got a good formula, which has been able to translate to you and also to a couple of other musicians that are working with him. And I think it's a wonderful thing. He doesn't look at it as a way of giving back, but I certainly do, being able to pass that on. How does that translate into your world, being around Joe and having that model to work by?
Well, I mean, I think that's another reason me and Joe have always got on so well, is that I've never understood the word no. So, when my first, label, Roof Records, said, "No, we can't tour you in America, it's too expensive," I went, okay, and I found a way to get a work visa, and I literally just mapped out venues and phoned them from my mom and dad's house and said, "Will you give me a gig?" I managed to book it myself. And, Joe's very much the same, the story you've just told. The labels say no. Okay, we'll make our own label.
Right.
And I think, unfortunately, in this business, you have to have that mentality of just, I think, as much as any talent, I think persistence is 50% of the battle. So to be doing that now and not be doing it alone is obviously, it makes life far easier to have that kind of support system.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, I got to turn my attention to your new album, Joanne, because this is some incredibly good stuff. I want you to talk about this album a little bit because you really seem like you've pushed some more boundaries with it, and it's quite a bit of work, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, I've always been of the opinion that every album, when I look back on my career, I would like every album to sound like me.
Sure.
But I would like every album to be different. In so much as, I'm not the same woman at 38 that I was when I did White Sugar when I was 22. And the voice has changed and the things I want to sing about have changed. My experiences have changed. So I hope there's always going to be differences and growth. But at the same time, I guess the challenge is how do I make it so that there's growth in the albums, but when you look back, it all sounds like the same woman, the same artist. And I think most fans know at this point, as I've said many times, I consider myself a blues guitarist that's a soul singer that likes writing pop rock songs. So the challenge for me is how do I write the best songs possible that sort of combine all of those genres, So I think we did it with Heavy Soul. There's like the blues rock stuff with Heavy Soul. There's some bluesier stuff.
Yes.
With Black Magic. There's also some of the poppy stuff like A Good Goodbye or Wild Love. And I think it all comes together to this flow as, a cohesive album.
Well, I'll tell you, the blues album was really what put you on my radar. And I just absolutely dig that album. So I'm always going through and mining for the good blues stuff. But I have to be honest with you. I think that, especially in this album, There's as you say, there's a generous supply of different parts of the genre and other genres mixed in there as well. But it's a very tastefully done mix. I mean, it's
Oh, good.
cohesive. It doesn't feel like you're going off in 15 directions, right?
Well, I mean, that's the battle, is to
Mhm.
make it so that it's not the first song's a rock song, the next song's a jazz song, the next song's, and just it's a collection of individual songs. You want it to be cohesive, like you just said.
Yeah.
And I've always said I think I would have been a different artist if I'd have been born a man. Um, because people ask me, why did you stray from the blues? And it's like, well, it wasn't intentional. It was a necessity because I was obsessed with Albert Collins and Luther Allison. But the guitar is a gender neutral instrument. I can try and do my vibrato like Albert Collins.
Right.
But, as a female, when I was trying to teach myself to sing, I was never going to sing like Howlin' Wolf or Stevie Ray Vaughan or Luther Allison. So I had to go find other voices I could kind of emulate and copy, and they tended to be more in soul and pop, Bonnie Raitt or Stevie Nicks, Tina Turner. So it was kind of, and then growing up in the era I did, I've always loved, poppy kind of catchy melodies. So it wasn't intentional to stray from the blues. Again, it was more of a necessity. And yeah, it is a fun challenge to wrap it all together and make it sound like me.
Well, and I think the other thing, Joanne, if people bust you about it too much, you can just tell them, hey, Buddy Guy mixes other stuff with his music. I mean, it's not all straight in the box blues. And I think,
Yeah, I mean, B.B. King did a song with you too.
sure. Yeah, there you go. And then Buddy Guy with the Rolling Stones. And I mean, Bonamassa just opened for the Stones. I mean, come on, it's you can't keep everything in the box. Somebody told me one time, if you keep the blues in the box, you may as well pronounce it dead and bury it, put it in a museum. And that's
Yeah.
not what it's about. So straying, as you say, straying from the blues, I don't find that to be a major issue. But I wanted
No,
to
good.
I want to talk about this for a minute. The tour, how is it going? How are people receiving the new music? And are we going to get to see you in Michigan anytime soon?
Well, I hate to break it to you, but tonight is the first night of the tour, so I can't really give you an accurate description of how it's going because we haven't even sound checked the first show yet. But I'm definitely looking forward to get going. In terms of Michigan, yes, we have a Kalamazoo date in the spring, I believe.
Ooh.
Don't quote me on this, but maybe like April 18th. We're doing the Kalamazoo State Theatre, which obviously I consider myself an honorary Michigander. I lived there for 15 years. So
Sure.
looking forward to coming home and playing that show.
Well, we would absolutely love to have you visit. And matter of fact, I just had a chance to photograph Buddy Guy's show at the State Theater in August. It's a beautiful venue. And I will be I'll be looking for that date, which happens to be, if it is the 18th, it's like 9 days after my birthday. So I got a great way to celebrate my birthday, right?
I know, yeah. I just checked. It is the 18th.
All right.
So,
Cool.
perfect. We'll see you there.
Oh, you can bank on that. Now, speaking of your tour, where can people go to find out information on the tour, maybe order some merchandise or one of your amazing CDs or even vinyl?
www.joanneshawtaylor.com, or if you just Google Joanne Shaw Taylor, it will pop straight up. And yeah, we're on Instagram and Facebook. So I'm easy to find.
Awesome. Well, Joanne Shaw Taylor, it has been a pleasure having you on this episode of Time Signatures. I certainly look forward to having an opportunity to see you on your next visit to Michigan. And you're certainly welcome to reach out anytime you have a new tour or a CD to release. And thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that wraps up this edition of Time Signatures with Jim Ervin. Once again, my thanks to Joanne Shaw Taylor, but most importantly to you, the subscriber, the listener, for without you, none of this would be possible. Jim Ervin reminding you that keeping the blues alive is everyone's responsibility, but preserving the history of the blues one story at a time, that's my mission. Until next time, so long.
This has been Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan. For more information on cabs, visit capitalareablues.org. You can find this episode and past episodes at lcconnect.org. The Time Signatures theme song, Michigan Roads, is used by permission and was written by Root Doctor, featuring Freddie Cunningham.
You know I'm trying, baby, driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
Until next time, keep on keeping the blues alive.